Hello and welcome to Disappeared, the Abyss. I'm your host Jacob, here with Alina. And how are you doing tonight, Alina?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Excited to be back to discuss another disappeared case. Tonight we are talking about the disappearance of Michelle McMullen. She was 27 years old when she disappeared on September 28th of 2008. Now, a little bit of background on Michelle and her case. She had recently moved to Ruston, Louisiana from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, so that she could finish up her nursing degree at Grambling State University. In order to finish that degree, she had to go there for her last semester. She had been completing her classes from Pennsylvania up until that point, but found out that she had to move in order to finish up that degree. Her father describes her as a very dedicated mother. He explains that she had a son whose name was Jaden, and he was her life. Now, Michelle had expected a grant to help pay for some of her schooling, but when she arrived to Louisiana, she realized that that grant had not actually been approved yet. So, in order to support herself and her son Jaden, she took a job at McDonald's. So, putting this all together, she was a full time student working towards her degree. She was also working full time in fast food, all of this while taking care of her son. This is a lot for anyone to take on. She has so much going on in her life, and already when I was watching, I was just thinking these are some reasons that someone might disappear when they have a lot on their plate.
I guess so. Um, I just, yeah, when I watched the episode, I can't even imagine how stressful that must be to have all these responsibilities. Obviously, she wants a better life for herself and her son, finishing her degree. So that's important. But she also wants to be a good mother, taking care of her son. Now finds herself having to work full time, and I don't think anyone could handle all these three lives basically, um, at once for a longer time. So I guess that could be a motive to go missing for some people. If you feel so overwhelmed and you can't imagine how you'd ever resolve that, I guess, if it just feels hopeless.
Right. We've both been through university, and just doing that, I'm sure you had moments too where you thought about just giving up for a second, the relief that you would feel of not having to deal with all of that course load and everything. And then for her, add on a full time job and a child, and I'm sure there's something enticing about that. Now, to help out with this, Michelle's parents decided that it might be best for Jaden to stay with them back in Pennsylvania until Michelle had finished up her degree. So Michelle's mom wanted to fly down in order to take Jaden home with her. Now, on Friday the 26th in 2008, her boss actually gave Michelle the day off from her job unexpectedly at McDonald's. So she decided to use that window to drive her son Jaden back home. Now, this would have been an 18-hour drive, so not a quick trip by any means. And she decided not to tell her parents that she was going to make this trip, which is kind of odd. Why do you think she did that, Alina?
I'm not sure because overall, I think it's a great idea that her son would live with her parents just for that semester. So she'd have the time to just focus on school, and she'd probably have to make a little less money, assuming that she wouldn't have to like pay for food and stuff for him. So maybe she could even cut some hours from her job. But why wouldn't she tell them? I'm not sure because I originally like they say that her mom planned to fly down there and pick up the son and then take him back home. And I guess maybe she didn't want to inconvenience them. Maybe she wanted to surprise them. Maybe she was worried they would say like, no, don't do it, it's a long drive, any sorts of reasons. yeah, come to mind. But overall, I do find it a little odd that she wouldn't tell them, especially since she's planning to bring him to them. So they must be, ready and available to care for her son at
Yeah.
some point, even if she's not planning to drop him off at their place right now. But they need to be
Yeah,
there.
I kind of think that perhaps maybe she, like you said, didn't want to inconvenience them. They're already, offering to take care of a young boy, so that's a big inconvenience for them that obviously they're willing to do, but maybe she said to herself, I just want to make this as easy as possible. I'll just bring him up there. And yeah, maybe if they had heard or she told them that she was going to do that, they would have not let her do it and would have decided, no, we'll come get him, don't worry. And she just didn't want to have them have to go through that. Before she left for the trip on Saturday, September 27th, she attends a college football game at her school, and then she leaves for the trip sometime between 3 and 5 o'clock that evening. She drives basically through the night, making very few stops, only for gas at one point. But we learn that Michelle had no intentions of dropping Jaden off at her parents' place. Instead, she talks to a friend who would take Jaden for the weekend and bring him to her parents later. Now, she had specifically instructed this friend, who's a childhood friend, not to tell her parents about the trip until that friend dropped Jaden off at her parents' house. And her parents say that she didn't want them to know, probably because they wouldn't have let her leave immediately after arriving in town. Kind of like we talked about, they, just want her to be safe and maybe get some rest. And it's a long, long drive. So if they knew that she was in town and had just driven, they weren't going to let her turn around and do that. But still, why might she have a friend watch her son for her instead of just, going right to the parents?
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense what we talked about, that potentially they wouldn't let her, after an 18-hour drive, make the same route back right away. And we know that she was only with her friend for like half an hour or something before she took off. So if that's what she planned to do, her parents may have just disagreed. And I think her mom even said in the episode, like, yeah, I would have taken like the keys from her and like sat on them. She was like very vocal that she wouldn't have let her go. So if that's something she knows about her parents, then it makes sense to drop him off with her friend first, I guess.
That's what I would do for my kid. I mean, no one should be driving 18 hours one way, stopping for a half hour and then turning around and trying to do the same thing again. I just don't know how anyone could do that
And I'm not
safely.
sure why she wanted to do that, just to be back in time for classes, but then why didn't she leave earlier, like sooner, right? If she got the
Yeah,
Friday off, but she left like Saturday
and went to the
afternoon.
football game.
Yeah, went to football. Maybe she promised her son. Like I was wondering actually why she went
Maybe.
there, but yeah, why not leave earlier, like sooner, and actually get some sleep when you're there, so it's all safer. I don't know why you'd put yourself in at risk, like I don't know, like that. I don't know if she's just underestimating things.
Yeah, it seems like multiple kind of unnecessary risks being taken. I mean,
Yeah.
she did let one friend know what was going on, so at least if something does happen to her, which we know eventually she is going to disappear, so at least we have one clue. But yeah, her parents at this point are in the dark.
So at around 8:30 p.m. Sunday night, Michelle arrived at her friend's place. Like we already said, she only stayed for about half an hour and left to drive back for another 18 hours. Michelle calls her friend one more time when she's back on the road to check in. The call only lasts a few minutes, is the last time anyone speaks to Michelle before she disappeared. Michelle's friends start to worry, and she's unable to reach her all day, and so she decides to tell her parents earlier than she promised. Her parents start to contact anyone they know who could be in contact with her, but they find out nothing. They decide to wait for Monday, well, for the whole day of Monday, because they think that would have been a day of travel for her, so They're trying not to get too worried yet. They're trying to tell themselves maybe that's why she isn't answering the phone, because she's on the road, and maybe we'll reach her on Tuesday. On Tuesday morning, when Michelle doesn't show up for her class, they start to get very worried because Michelle wouldn't miss class. That's when they decide to report her missing, and police explain that Michelle hasn't been missing long enough for her to be reported missing.
That bugs me so much, because how many different times do we hear conflicting stories about this? Some police departments are like, oh, that sounds really concerning, we're going to start investigating right away. Other times it's a total opposite, where they're like, you got to wait 3 days, 72 hours, or whatever arbitrary kind of thing that they put in place. And it's just like, we know how important the period is right after someone goes missing. Those first 24, 48 hours are so critical. And sometimes they put this artificial block in place, and it just delays everything even further. And, we've reported on disappeared episodes before where they ended up changing the policies after certain cases and realizing that's probably not a good idea. No mention of that here, but I would be curious to know if police after this kind of changed things and maybe made it so you don't have to wait 72 hours to report someone missing.
Yeah, I wonder why it seems to be different everywhere, and if it's really such a hassle for them to, type up that report. And even
Exactly.
if in 80% of the times the person shows up within like the next 48 hours or 72 hours, and then they have to delete it, is that really not worth having all that information, or having the time on your side in those cases where it's crucial, where this time
Absolutely.
is missing and where this could have made the difference? Because we have so many cases too where surveillance video footage is taped over because it's only available maybe for the first 24 hours. And if they just jump right into it, they could have that, and it could really break a case wide open. It could make the difference, just to get on it right away. And so it's frustrating because I understand everyone always brings up, put yourself in their shoes. Most people do show up. These cases we're discussing are the exception, and I understand, but I just wonder, is it like really not possible? Is it really that much more work to take these missing person cases right then and there when someone comes?
And maybe you don't investigate it like fully in that 72 hours. Maybe you just enter their name in the database so that if they find their car somewhere within those 3 days, it'll pop up on a screen and they can say, oh, here he or she is. They don't necessarily have to go put search dogs out there and kind of waste a lot of resources on people who, in most cases probably do turn up. But how hard would it just be to say, hey, be on the lookout for this person right now, their family can't find them? I feel like that wouldn't break the department to do.
Yeah, or if some detective or someone is, patrolling around and kind of has some time in their hand and they know about this case, they could go and check out one or two of their places they usually frequent, or that they could have been seen at last. So it could make the difference in the end. On Wednesday, October 1st, Michelle's father is allowed to file a missing persons report, and when police start to investigate her case, they find out that Michelle sometimes had severe migraine headaches, and they wonder if they may have something to do with her disappearance. A year earlier, one of the attacks was so strong that she collapsed and her son had to call for help. Her father thinks that her migraine attacks could have been a good explanation, and she may have been in an accident. An investigator comments that if you have an accident on one of the back roads, it could be a month before anyone finds you. Her parents start to call hospitals along the road that they believe she would have taken, but they find no trace of Michelle. When I heard the police officer talk about those back roads, I was just like, why are you assuming that she took a back road? It may have just been random, but to me it was like, do we have reason to believe that, I don't know, she was taking back roads to get back?
I don't think so. On road trips I've been on, usually you're just trying to get where you're going as quick as possible,
Yeah.
and back roads are only going to slow you down. And I was thinking maybe she got lost, but that doesn't make sense because she just made this trip. All she has to
Yeah.
do is retrace her steps. Potentially, there's also been situations where maybe there's a lot of traffic on the road, and if you know the area, you might decide, oh, hey, I know the old highway and I can go around this and get over it or whatever. But this is probably not an area that she knew well enough to do that, considering it's, such a long drive. The odds of her knowing every area along the way are pretty small. So I
Yeah.
can't think of too many reasons why she would have been on a back road.
So at this point, it just seems like, I mean, they called a lot of hospitals along the way that they think she would have taken, and they find no trace of her. So it just seems like an accident is unlikely because you'd usually find them pretty soon, pretty quick. When police interview her friend, so the friend that she dropped her son off at on Sunday, she tells them that she believes Michelle ran away. And she hands over a letter to police that Michelle left for her before she drove off. In the letter, Michelle apologized to her friend for getting her in the middle of everything. It also contained information on how her son should be cared for, and she writes that she feels like the fingers are all on her and that she's hurting and scared. Michelle's mother, however, questions the authenticity of the letter because she doesn't think it's Michelle's handwriting. After analyzing the letter and talking to Michelle's friend, the police decide they have no reason to conduct a handwriting analysis. I don't know if my mom could really tell whether I wrote a letter or not, because I think the last time she looked at my handwriting a lot was when I was way younger, and it changed since then. So it may be similar, but may look a little different. Maybe that is the reason why she thinks it's, well, because she says it looks similar, but it doesn't quite look like hers. Maybe it just changed over the last 3 years.
Exactly. Yeah, the odds of, like, I guess what she's trying to say is somebody else wrote this who
Mm-hmm.
knows what her daughter's handwriting looks like, which to me is even weirder. Like
Yeah.
you said, if your parents can't necessarily identify your handwriting, what are the odds that someone who wrote this on behalf of Michelle also knows it well enough to imitate it? It just seems like they're reaching and not wanting to believe that Michelle left this letter, which, would then, what are they trying to say? Like, point the finger at the friend then, and
Right.
that she's making up this story? I don't really know where they're trying
Because
to
at
go with
that
this.
point, it would have to be the friend, right? Because she says she received it from her, and if they're saying it's not her handwriting, that would only leave the conclusion that her friend faked it. And then
Exactly.
what's her motive for faking that? It's odd. But
It's
yeah.
very odd. While police consider the possibility that Michelle may have run away, her parents are absolutely certain that she would never do that. Not that that's unusual to hear from parents. I mean,
It's
how many
not.
cases do we hear where they say no, they would never have left, or if they did leave, they would tell someone where they were going?
It's true. There's so many cases, and in one of the podcasts I listened to a lot, they brought up basically like, well, why would parents believe that something like bad happened to their child rather than believing that they ran off or that they committed suicide? Um, and that basically that alone must be a reason that that's not what happened. I don't know. It's a little confusing, but basically it, with so many cases, that is the case, that they'd rather believe something bad happened to their child than that they, I guess something else bad happened too, but like, succumb to the elements, commit suicide, or trying to live another life. I think what makes that like the easier version or angle to accept is that that way their child is innocent and there's no blame on them. And I think as a parent, like in that kind of situation where everything's already so crazy, it's just easier to think about it
I,
that way.
yeah, and also I think there could be some sense of guilt if you are to say yes they ran away. I'm sure as a parent you're going to be like, what did I do wrong that made them feel like they couldn't come to me for help, or that they couldn't, find a way out of this, that their only option was to leave everything behind. I'm sure no family wants to have to come to terms with that realization, or just all the different scenarios playing in your head, like, why didn't I see this coming? What could I have done? It's just much easier to say, that's not what they did, and yeah, they had no control over what happened. 1 week later, after the disappearance, police receive a call that Michelle's car has now been found just across the border in Maryland near a truck assembly plant. Now, the car, they guess, had been sitting there for about 7 to 10 days, which fits up pretty nicely with the timeline of Michelle's disappearance. Now, her family and her parents believe the car being found there is an indicator of foul play, which could be or could not be true. It really comes down to, where the car was found, the condition that it's in, so many different factors that can play into that. I thought it was weird when they said the car was found at a truck assembly plant, kind of that same idea of, why would it be off of the highway? Why would it be, not somewhere on the main road where she would have been trying to get back home?
Yeah, I think if you assume that she was trying to head home, that's where her car should have been, on the highway or somewhere straight on the route to get home. Because then you're assuming something was wrong with the car, or she ran out of gas, or had to pull over to sleep, or whatever. It makes sense, but finding it somewhere off the road basically is even more mysterious, because you wonder why she even drove there.
Yeah,
So I guess
exactly.
if you wanted to interpret something into it, you could think that maybe she wanted to get away from the car unseen, and that would probably be easier if you're not on like one of the main roads.
When the investigators take a look at the car, they find the doors are locked. They open it up and find inside there is Michelle's cell phone, her wallet, her keys, and her ID. So basically, all of her personal items are inside of the locked vehicle next to this truck assembly plant. And this is where I started to get more worried now, because the second someone is separated from all of their belongings, it's like, okay, what are they doing? Where are they at? And what resources do they have to get to somewhere safe with no mode of transportation, no money, no way to call for help or anything? It does seem very suspicious, especially in that location.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad sign whenever they find, yeah, all the belongings someone could have or need. Even if you're thinking someone might try to get away, people usually need some money, some clothes, like something. Um, but that's why I wonder, they never really bring up if she had withdrawn some cash in the days before. So, yeah, if you find a wallet that tells you, okay, she didn't take her credit card, that's in the wallet, but if she withdrew some cash, maybe she has cash on her. They just don't bring anything up, so I'm assuming that's not the case, because usually they talk about that. But yeah, just your mind spinning, like what's happened here. But it doesn't, we've discussed other cases, where there's a lot of things suspicious about the car, like where a car door will be open, or the car seat will be pushed all the way back, where you're like, well, this person couldn't have driven it, or it looks like it's involved in an accident. There's a lot of things that could look suspicious about a car that aren't true, or that aren't the case here. So
Right, and there's no
yeah.
signs of a struggle or anything like that. So police, they search the area. It's a mix of wooded area and farmland. It's pretty sparsely populated, especially at night. And they bring in scent tracking dogs, and they actually are able to track Michelle's scent about 50 feet away from her car towards the main road, which to me is a good and bad sign at this point. If it were into the woods, I'd be a lot more worried. But the question now is, if she was headed back to the main road, who was she with and where was she going? Now, her parents look at this and believe that it's an indicator that she was met with foul play. That's kind of how they look at a lot of things in her case. Police find no clues to where she may have gone or why she disappeared. And the parents are kind of in disbelief that the security guard at this truck plant didn't see Michelle, come or go from the car since it was near that location. Now, police learned that another police station put out a warrant for her arrest, and this kind of changes the case from here on out. They learn that Michelle is wanted for forgery, theft by unlawful taking, and theft by deception. So Michelle worked at a church before she had moved to Louisiana, and it is alleged that she stole money from them, which they realized later. And a little less than a month before she left to move to Louisiana, she was fired for poor performance. And that's when they start going back and kind of looking at what she had done. And the church officials think that she stole around $19,000 from them in her role as an administrator at this church. And when she learned of the investigation, she did try to contact the investigator who was in charge of her case. She left a voicemail and emailed him, but her father says they just missed each other. Apparently, Michelle would not provide the investigator with her cell phone number, so they were only really left with email to communicate. And for whatever reason, they just weren't able to link up and talk about that. So now the case has taken a turn, certainly. There is, some allegations of criminal activity involved, and now a potential reason for Michelle to have wanted to disappear.
Yeah. Um, if the amount that they talk about, that's a lot of money. You wonder what she spent it on, if she spent it all. Yeah, I wondered, did she get a fake ID, which would obviously help her to stay off the grid? Or did she, just still have cash from that she could spend, that she could use? Um, I guess with her wallet and her keys and her phone being found, they talk about it and they point out basically like, well, if she was trying to disappear, like she would have needed those things. She would have needed her phone, her credit card. But if you assume she's pretty smart, then it'd probably be better not to use those things because you'd be tracked. That's what they do. And
Exactly.
she may have known that. So pointing towards that, like I get why it's concerning that they find these things, but it could also just mean that she was smart enough to know that she couldn't use them from here on out if she really wanted to go missing. And now we do have a reason because even though we talked about it before that having maybe enough in your life for three lives and that could be really stressful, just having that as a reason, I don't think it's as strong a motive as we have now with her running, from this charge. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that it's just one more thing. She was maybe already at the breaking point, already maybe at her limit. And then you add this on top of her, some, accounting anomalies and a criminal investigation. And that definitely could tip someone over the edge to the point that they think this is all too much and now's my time to go. And the timing is obviously suspicious. I mean, this is just a
Yeah.
month before she packs up and moves to Louisiana. Now, apparently, she doesn't realize until she gets to Louisiana that the grant didn't go through and she's not getting that money. So I don't necessarily think that, she was taking this money as a way to make up for what she was losing. I don't know that she realized that she wouldn't have that money yet, but clearly, she probably had a lot of expenses in her life with a child and with school, tuition, and working low wage jobs. So it makes sense why she may or may not have, did some things while working with the church to kind of skim off the top, and now it's coming back to haunt her.
Yeah, and I remember her parents point out that she well, this couldn't be a motive for her to want to run away because she contacted the police investigator in the case. She tried to call him and give him her email address, and they were emailing, and like you said, they kept missing each other, which I'm not sure how that would work if you email. How are you going to miss each other? I'm not sure.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know if it's still concerning. Like, I'd be scared of I'm now, yeah, I mean, even if you just read the letter, like you find it in the letter too, like, oh, I think, everyone's pointing at me, like I'm scared.
Yep.
This could just be alluding to these
That letter makes a
charges.
lot more
Yeah, it
sense
makes a
now.
lot more sense now. The Harrisburg Police Department has to re-examine the case. The fact that there is a warrant for her arrest and the letter all points towards the possibility that Michelle may have run away. Her parents fear that police focus too much on that possibility and have already made up their mind. Police find no indicator to where she may be when they search her phone and computer. Her dad is convinced that there were more reasons to believe that she was murdered or abducted than that she simply walked away. The police states that anything is still possible in Michelle's case at this point. Police believe her parents have no idea what happened to her, but they think her friend may know more than she's said, and she's actually failed a polygraph test. Do you agree with her dad? Is there more evidence for abduction than running away?
My impression is no. I think there are quite a few signs that are showing why she would want to run away as opposed to something bad happening to her. Granted, it could be both. I mean, she could have tried running away to escape some of her problems, and just by nature you're in a more vulnerable situation when you do that, trying to be off the grid, and maybe something happened to her after that. That's possible, but I don't think that's what the dad or the family is saying. I think they, as far as they're concerned, she was just trying to head back to work and school in Louisiana, and something happened to her. But there's just so many signs at this point, with her history, with the police looking into her, with her kind of being mysterious with her friend, leaving this note, not wanting to tell her parents right away what's going on, and her friend being deceptive. All these things are adding up just to show that there's probably something else going on here.
Yeah, and I mean, her friend even said, like, she told police, I think she ran away. If that isn't telling you, I mean, she's the last one who talked to her. She did receive this letter. They have no reason to assume this letter wasn't from Michelle. They have a good motive, a good reason for her to want it to be gone. Yeah, there's a lot that points towards her having run away. An acquaintance is surprised when he spots Michelle working at a motel. She left right away and didn't even pack all her things. Police show her former co-workers pictures of Michelle, and they identify her as the woman who works at the motel. Basically, they had just missed her by 10 minutes. Michelle gave them a false name and told them that she ran from an abusive boyfriend. She also told them that she had lost her ID in Hurricane Katrina. Michelle had been working just 30 miles from where her car was discovered in West Virginia, a little less than 100 miles from her hometown. Her parents are not convinced, however, that it was her. They want the police to test for DNA or fingerprints, but police basically doesn't think that's necessary because, they got the acquaintance that is sure it was her. They got the woman running, which if it wasn't her, why would she run? And they showed, like I said, pictures to other co-workers, and they've identified her. So
They had multiple positive IDs.
99% sure that's her. Like, I don't see why would anybody else run then. Like, they would just be like, oh, I just apparently look like her. Here I am.
Right. I feel for her parents, but the writing is kind of on the wall at this point, and you can't just keep refusing to believe until, like, oh, you see this or that, or, it's pretty clear at this point.
On January 21st, 2011, police in Oakland, California get a call from a disappeared viewer who's recognized Michelle at a hair salon. 4 days later, they raid the place, and Michelle, who used a different name yet again, tried to flee again, but police caught her. On March 4th, 2011, she was extradited to Pennsylvania. Her lawyer stated that the amount that she stole had been presented is higher than it actually was. And this outcome is not very surprising to us. Or were you surprised?
No, I think, as the episode unfolded, it became pretty clear where things were headed, and especially after she was spotted at the motel and ran, it was likely she was going to try and pull the same move again, just somewhere else. And, to her credit, she made it work for a couple more years, because this is in 2011 now, after the episode has aired, that someone spots her at this salon. And my thought is, I wonder what her parents thought now that it's confirmed and done.
Yeah, I mean, this worked out like it's planned. Disappeared is trying to help families, trying to help investigators find missing people. And here we have a prime example where it all worked out. A disappeared viewer recognized her from the show, knew her because she was a customer there, and yeah, let the police know that she could solve this case. I'm glad that they know now, because her parents were really worried and thought that she was probably dead. So at least they know that now. And we know that she was, I think, in jail for a few months because they wouldn't allow her to be out on bail because she might try to run again, which is obviously unfortunate, but she was released on probation in July 2011 and was ordered to pay back $6,000. So definitely a lot less than the $19,000 we brought up earlier, more than her lawyers or her parents claimed she owed them. But yeah, I mean, it's that I don't know, we were talking about this, but like, wasn't this outcome worse than facing the charges in the first place? Maybe she didn't really know what to expect and thought she was facing a longer sentence and would go to prison for way longer than she actually did. But just running, and there's an article where her dad even alludes to that she endured like way worse things being on the run, basically, than she would have if she would have just gone to jail, or maybe she wouldn't even have had to go to jail for this. So it's sad overall, but it's just great that her family got some resolution here, and yes, she's reunited with her son, and he doesn't have to grow up without his mom. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think exactly. This, unfortunately, she made things worse for herself by choosing to run away when she could have just owned up to what had happened, and she wouldn't have lost years with her son. She wouldn't have lost years with her parents. She could have stuck with school, graduated, gone on to do some great things. But I think she saw an easy out that turned out to be not so easy in the end. But it is, you're right, a good example of how disappeared can work and raise the profile of some of these cases and bring a resolution to it. Whether or not it was the resolution that the family wanted or thought they were going to get, or what Michelle wanted or thought she was going to get, probably not. I just wonder, how long would Michelle have gone on with her alternate identity if a viewer hadn't have spotted her? Would she have just gone the rest of her life without seeing her parents or her child, just to escape a $6,000, accusation of theft? It just seems like a lot.
Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, have a good day. Bye, Jacob.
Good night, Alina.